live.
We're live. Good evening, everyone. This is Mayor Shawyn Patterson-Howard, and tonight we have a special Sundays with Shawyn. Our guest tonight is our DA, Anthony Scarpino, a native of Mount Vernon, and we also have our Commissioner Glenn Scott, who is our new commissioner of the police department since January, but a 20-year veteran of the Mount Vernon Police Department. So DA Scarpino, we're going to start off with you. We would really like you to kind of just introduce yourself in about 3 minutes, because we want to make sure we have an opportunity and time for questions and answers. We are asking everyone right now, if you can please take a moment to share this video to start a watch party. We want to make sure we give friends and family an opportunity to get critical information. So please, at this time, if you could just take a moment to start a watch party. And we're going to begin in about 15 seconds, DA Scarpino. We're just giving everybody an opportunity to get queued up, and we will be ready to go. All right, we have about 50 people online already, and so we're going to go from there. So DA Scarpino, can you give us about a 3-minute introduction? I know that's not a lot of time to talk about your long history, but we want to really have more time to talk about your work, okay?
Okay, well, thank you very much for the opportunity, Mayor. So as you know, my name is Tony Scarpino. I'm the District Attorney of Westchester County, been the District Attorney now for 3 years. Born and raised in Mount Vernon, graduated Mount Vernon High School 1 year before George Latimer, 1 year after Mayor Young. So, you know, we were all classmates. I went to, after graduating college, and I went to law school to try to go into the FBI. That was my goal. When I graduated law school, I graduated Syracuse. I came back to Mount Vernon and I had my first job working for the late Mayor Thomas Sharp as an assistant corporation counsel. Served about 11 months there. And then I had the opportunity to go down to Quantico, Virginia to become a special agent with the FBI. Okay. I served in the FBI for 4.5 years. First assignments were in Kentucky and Louisville, Kentucky and southeastern Kentucky. Then I was transferred back to Manhattan, where I worked espionage and was an intelligence officer. After a few years after I left, Mayor Sharp invited me to come back to Mount Vernon and become a city judge in the city of Mount Vernon. I was first the associate city court judge, and then I ran for election in 1986 in Mount Vernon and was elected city court judge. And I served there through 1988 when I was elected to Westchester County Court. I served in the county court up in White Plains. All this time, of course, I'm still living in Mount Vernon. And in the county court, handling the more serious criminal cases. In 1993, I ran for New York State Supreme Court, was elected. And I served there until 2000. In 2000, I was elected surrogate of Westchester. And I served in a surrogate, which handles the state matters, for 15 years. In 2015, I left the bench, went out into private practice for a short period of time. And then when Judge DeFiore, who was the district attorney and also a Mount Vernon resident, when she was elevated to the Court of Appeals, I ran on the Democratic line, of course, and was elected DA in 2016. And so it's been, you know, 3 years now. It's more than 3 years that I've been district attorney. And so it's been a wonderful opportunity, and I've enjoyed it very much. And I, of course, lived in Mount Vernon for like 47 years. I know it very well. My family was one of the first 5 families of Italian background to move in the late 1800s. We lived originally on North Street. And then moved down, eventually moved on to my father's first house was on Seneca Avenue down on Langdon Terrace. And then we moved to North Fulton, and I grew up on North Fulton and eventually on Devonia Avenue. So
okay,
a little bit of background.
You have a very great background here as a longtime Mount Vernon resident, and your family has definitely a legacy here in the city of Mount Vernon. So I'm going to jump into the questions, and we're going to kind of go back and forth. Myself and the commissioner will trade off. So one of the greatest concerns of a community and priorities of any mayoral administration is public safety. As the Chief Law Enforcement Officer for the County of Westchester, please share with me your thoughts around your office's role in crime prevention, crime intervention, and restorative justice.
Well, that's a very complicated question, but I'm more than happy to try to start in no particular order. When I first was elected, the Democratic Party was hoping to take control of the legislature, and they had a very aggressive agenda. Unfortunately, the Senate was held by the Republicans, and the criminal justice agenda was stalled. So when I first came in, I wanted to take a very progressive approach. I decided that I would change the past policies of seeking bail on individuals on minor cases where they'd be in jail for $250, $500 and stay in jail for 4 or 5 months, and then eventually have a disposition in which jail was not supposed to be, was not going to occur. So I changed our policy where we would not seek bail in any case in which we would not be seeking jail time at the end of the case. So that was a diversion from past practices. And this had a major impact, I believe, on Black and brown communities. Then also, as we were wanted to have additional impact by taking the step of not prosecuting possessions of small amounts of marijuana for personal use under 2 ounces, because this was a B misdemeanor. That B misdemeanor had tremendous collateral damages, especially to people, communities of Black and brown folks. And because that B misdemeanor would prevent them from getting student loans, housing issues, it followed them wherever they went. If they wanted to become a beautician and get a license. And so by deciding that we would not prosecute those cases, it helped to reduce our jail population and helped to stabilize the communities that I was very concerned about, and was part of the agenda that was being stalled up in Albany. So those were 2 aggressive, progressive approaches we took. But when it comes to the safety and welfare of the people of Westchester, it was very important for me to try to redirect these resources into our more violent criminal activities. And so I created a special gangs, guns, and narcotics group. And our focus was to try to attack those individuals and bring these cases that involve gangs. When you combine gangs, guns, and narcotics, it's a recipe for violence. They are fighting over their own territory. They're injuring each other. They are injuring innocent people in the neighborhood. They're holding communities hostage. And so we created this group and working with our local law enforcement partners and our other federal partners. In 3 years, we were able to indict and prosecute over 70 major gang members. And by taking them off the street, we saw a precipitous drop in violent crime from 2016 when I came in, to the end of January of 2019. The drop was very precipitous, and I'll just give you some quick numbers. Murders were down countywide by 33%, robberies down by 51%, aggravated assault by 20%, burglaries down by 57%. So this was the goal is always to try to identify the individuals that are the small group that are creating crimes. All of us in Mount Vernon know Mount Vernon is filled with wonderful people, wonderful communities. But there are always in every community a small group of individuals that create the violence. And so by focusing on them, pulling them out, we had tremendous success, and we watched that overall drop far greater than any other community and in any other county in Westchester. And so Westchester has been rated for violent crimes based on population, the safest county in the state. Now, this was through December of this year, of 2019. 2020, the world has started to change. We have, now we're in the middle of COVID, of course, and this is, law enforcement and the court system where they pushed the pause button. The pause button was supposed to be through, the 19th of April. The governor has extended that. I expect Judge Davidson, who is our administrative judge, to be changing the policies, also extending the pause button. So right now, we don't have regular court sessions going on. Mount Vernon City Court, we have 40 other jurisdictions that have courts. They've all been consolidated into one single court at the county courthouse for local court matters. And then we have a county court part going on. So they're only taking emergency cases, only taking cases in which under the New York State law, bail could be set, orders of protection that are necessary. There are no grand juries operating. So there are no trials, no hearings going on. So this is something that is having an impact on how we do our law enforcement. They've made rules that we cannot, we have to issue desk appearance tickets on any case in which bail cannot be set. And as you know, under the new state legislatures, our new law, our criminal justice laws, the initiative starting January 1, many crimes of misdemeanor level, nonviolent felonies, no bail is allowed to be placed. So those cases are, desk appearance tickets are being issued because those are the directives of the court system. It's very, very unique time for us, and a very unique time for you, I'm sure. I mean, you know, besides struggling with all the issues that you have in Mount Vernon and the history of interesting government process, you now have to deal with something nobody else has ever had to deal with. The same with myself. No district attorney's ever had to deal with something like COVID.
Definitely. And in about 2 minutes, if you can kind of just give me an idea, because we talked about preventative intervention, if you spoke about the intervention and restorative, we'll talk about restorative later. Can you just give me some idea around, you know, what your office does, or if you have any programs around crime prevention?
Well, first of all, when it comes to crime prevention, our assistant district attorneys do over 300 presentations to schools and to community groups, including myself. We start in the elementary schools, going all the way up through the high schools. We talk about gangs. We talk about, you know, prom issues, alcohol, drug addiction. So as part of the program is to try to prevent people and steer people away from coming into the criminal justice system by education. We also, of course, we have tried to divert, we have the, you know, with the new legislation, trying to divert our youth outside the criminal justice system. We are working and involved in the youth courts that are there. So we divert 16 and 17-year-olds out of the criminal justice system into family court and non-criminal part. We support and have worked on our drug courts, our veterans courts, our mental health courts. All of these are steps and efforts to try to divert people outside the criminal justice system into community-based types of supervision, because once they enter the criminal justice system, it, you know, the likelihood of success of them coming out of there in a positive fashion are reduced. Community-based supervision is the best way to try to do it. So, you know, these are, you know, steps that I've always supported and tried to do. We are trying to create, of course, it's been disrupted by COVID, to try to establish a pre-arraignment diversion program, so that before the case even a person gets into the system, before they get arraigned, that we could divert them out. And we've been working with our county executive to try to establish this program. And we would fund it and try to get non-for-profits to be involved, so that we could get our young people, or people that have these minor offenses outside the system, try to get them some training to make some progress in not bringing them within the criminal justice system.
Okay, well, thank you so much. So our next question will go to our Commissioner Scott. Commissioner Scott, you have a question?
Good evening, Commissioner.
Good evening. How are you?
I'm doing okay. How are you?
Oops, Glenn, you muted yourself. Hold on. You muted yourself. We can't hear you, Glenn. You have to unmute yourself. There you go. Now we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I want to express deep regret for the passing of retired Chief Greg Amato of the town of Carmel PD. I just found out that he passed. This is very disheartening within the law enforcement community, and I want to express my condolences to the town of Carmel PD. This is a recent thing that has happened, so everybody may not know about it. For the DA, DA Scarpino, I want to thank you for showing up. I want to thank you for having an audience with me. And I want to thank you because back in the day, as you said, in 1988, when you were city judge, you officiated my marriage. And
Is that another, was that
I
another,
think
is that
I
another
think you
life
should have
sentence?
warned me about that. Yeah, you should have warned me about that, okay? So I hold that against you. So anyway, seriously, I want to know what the Mount Vernon Police Department can do to solidify our relationship with you in the DA's office and what we can do to make our cases more solidified so that you can prosecute them. Is there any advice on what you can do as far as that is concerned?
Well, I think I'm very glad to hear that, we've had difficulty in the prior administration before you came in, before the mayor came in. We had very serious concerns about working with the existing administration and the commissioners, or at least especially the deputy commissioner that was there. And so it made life a little more difficult, but we have a very good group of assistant district attorneys down in Mount Vernon. Of course, I'm sure you've met Shamika Mathurin, who is our branch chief.
Love her. I absolutely love her. Her and John Thomas, I love them. They're great.
Well,
Absolutely fantastic people, and you should commend them.
So we have to, it's lines of communication, Commissioner. My line is always open. My chief of investigators is Chief McNerney, who was the Greenberg police chief. He's had your type of job for many years. We are here to support you in any way we can. It's just a matter of picking up a phone and calling us, and we are happy to talk with you. You know that we have several matters that we are working in regards to with your internal affairs unit, and those lines of communication should be open and used, and it's open on our side. You should not be afraid to, if you have any questions, to contact us directly, and we are happy to provide you with any information that you need as we work with your internal affairs group. There is a lot of good things that we hope to accomplish in Mount Vernon, but it's important for you to, as new commissioner, to establish the authority within the police department, because the police department has had its issues over the years, and as you know, we have unfortunately 3 cases that are pending with local police officers. We have other investigations that are going on that your internal affairs unit is involved in, but we are here to assist you in any way. So you should never be afraid to contact us. Speak with and have your lieutenant speak with Shamika on any of the cases as you're working. Over the years, and it's just a standard that the police departments and district attorney's offices, we are partners in some manners, but we don't always agree on everything. It's not unusual for the police department to feel that a case is ready to go, and a district attorney's office, someone like Shamika, would say, we need a little bit more here, and take that type of direction. That is you just watch. Everybody who watches Law and Order knows that's the case, and it happens to be. But we are here to assist you and work with you, and we look forward to doing that.
Well, I appreciate that, and I just want to say that in my 4-month tenure, it's been very frustrating because I've been trying to get the bad actors out of the police department, and I want to see them removed. This is one of the things I promised when I came in, and it seems like there's some type of lag in this process. Now, yes, I'm new to the game, but there's certain things that seem like they should be precedent and move forward.
Well, we have the 3 cases that are pending in the court system. The court system is paused. We have two individuals, 2 officers that have been indicted. Those cases are on in the trial assignment part, but there are no trials going on. The cases are not going to be moving because of COVID. There's nothing that you or me or anyone can do until the court system gets up and running. Those indictments have occurred. We have a third officer that's also charged. But so we're not, those matters, they are in the court system, and they are moving ahead. When it comes to our investigations, there are several investigations going on, but you know what they are. we can't talk publicly about them. But the fact of the matter is, when you run your detective division and you speak to them, it's very hard to do investigations the way we used to before COVID came. It's difficult to do in-person interviews. That's a problem. We use the grand jury system in our investigations. There are no grand juries right now. So everything is operating. We can't do quite the job that we used to at the rapid pace that we all would hope to be able to do. And public integrity type cases are very important that they move as rapidly as possible, because the mayor and the cities have lawsuits and other matters that are going to be are of importance to them, and they'd like to see the criminal matters move ahead. But right now, the pause button has occurred, and there's just so much that we all can do. We are continuing to conduct numerous investigations, though, down there, Commissioner, and that we're involved in, and we are always happy to update and work with your internal affairs people.
You know what? Thank you. I appreciate that. The public needs to know this. The public needs to know that it's not the Mount Vernon Police Department and not the DA's office that are dragging their feet on these investigations, and that we are pushing forward in full alliance in trying to get these cases solved and these bad actors removed out of the system. And I thank you for explaining that so clarifying that to the public right now. This is so much appreciated. Thank you.
Well, it's my pleasure, and you know, Commissioner, that right now, under the new legislation that we're faced with, we cannot, have cases brought to the emergency part if they are not cases of magnitude, felonies, because since bail can't be set, we have to issue desk appearance tickets, which they've required us to put out in the hopes that when those dates come up, that the world will be back to normal. I am not convinced now that the world will be back to normal on the original dates we picked, but we're going to have to continue to follow this and see how it goes. I wish I had a crystal ball to tell you when this, the world was going to get, back up in order. But your guess is as good as mine.
Thank you.
Okay, so it's back in my court. So I'm, this was kind of a follow-up to Commissioner Scott's question, is really what is your philosophy and around dealing with police corruption? I mean, you are a law enforcement official, and it is very difficult for police to police the police, if that makes sense. It's hard, and it's not popular for police to police the police. But it is a necessary evil of your job, looking at dealing with police corruption, because police corruption does exist. And then there are some police who do use excessive force. And, so what is your philosophy really around dealing with those cases? And what has your experience been dealing with those cases here in Westchester? We know it's not popular to deal with as a DA. And it's definitely not popular to deal with during an election season, but it's still an important issue, especially for the integrity of any police community. I think most police who are good police don't want to see bad police amongst their ranks, as it sullies the reputation and the integrity of the profession.
Well, you're absolutely right, Mayor. The bad apples make it difficult for the bulk of the good police officers to do their job. And so it's critical, politics doesn't enter into it. During my 3 years, we have numerous public integrity cases. We prosecuted almost 40 public integrity cases to conviction. In addition, many of them, 8 or 9 were law enforcement officers. And I have found that the members of law enforcement are supportive of our doing this work because it hurts everyone. When a bad police officer comes to light, the information about them, it seems it spreads onto all of us. It gives us all a black eye, and so we have to work very hard to root it out. It doesn't concern me, that that there's anyone feels there's some view of politics or anything of that nature. I'm not afraid or concerned about prosecuting police officers or any public officials that are involved in criminal activity. The important thing is developing those cases. And we have a public integrity group. I've actually made changes in that group over the last 6 months to make them even more aggressive. We have a new head of that division, Ms. Skulko, and we've had some major successes in the corrections department and the different police departments, whether fire departments and other groups. It's a very important part of what we do.
Okay, so I'm going to let this go over to our Commissioner Scott. And then I know we have a few questions from the community that I want to make sure that we get to. So Commissioner Scott. Thank you, DA Scarpino.
You know, I appreciate this one-on-one, but the Mount Vernon community was recently besieged by a one-man crime spring, Mr. Lamont Ridenour. This individual was arrested by the Mount Vernon PD on 32 occasions since February. I do not believe this type of crime spree would be tolerated in any other community. What will you do in the future to ensure that this flagrant criminal behavior is not tolerated or loosely addressed?
Well, all of those cases, well, first of all of those cases that you mentioned are being prosecuted by our office. This individual, I mean, the mayor knows him. He has a reputation for being out there and being a troublemaker. All of his actions, though, were non-bailable offenses. We could not get bail on him because they were minor in nature. We did have actually 2 cases in which we were able to bring in front of a judge where we asked for bail, and that bail application was denied by the judge. We asked on several occasions for 730 examinations because questioning his mental status. Both of those applications were denied and he was released by the judge. These are not things that we have control of. We do not release people. That is a determination that's done by bail, is done by the judge. So he is a very unique individual when it comes to it. And unfortunately, he's in Mount Vernon, but it has nothing to do with any suggestion that we would handle these cases any differently anywhere else. But there was nothing more that we could do, whether we had this individual in Mount Vernon or Scarsdale. There would be no difference because the nature of his minor offenses did not entitle us to even ask for bail. Many of them we had to issue desk appearance tickets under this COVID situation we are facing. But all of those cases are pending. And now he has been arrested, fortunately, on a serious crime, and he is off the streets. Bail was set, even at a lower amount than we had asked for, and he's in the county jail.
So, sir, you're telling me that on the plethora of charges that he went through, with varying degrees of arson, robbery, attempted robbery, grand and petty larceny, reckless endangerments, criminal trespass, and criminal contempt. In total, he was arrested of 32 times on a total of 49 criminal charges. February, he had a total of 4 arrests. One was a warrant arrest, and others were criminal trespass. And in one of those instances, he also was charged with criminal possession of a controlled substance in the 7th degree. March is when the arson charges started. Ridenour was arrested a total of 22 times in March alone and charged with various arson charges, okay? 14 criminal trespass or trespassing charges, 2 arson, 5, 2 arson, 3, 1 arson, 4, 2 criminal contempts, 1 robbery, 3, and various misdemeanor and violation charges. In this month alone, he had 4 occasions where there were 2 arrests in a single day. My guys were putting themselves out there in harm because this guy is a dangerous guy. Sometimes he's covered in feces. Often we have to fight with him, and we could not get any kind of relief. Okay? I was putting my officers out there in constant harm. Okay?
Well, Commissioner,
April, he had a total of 6 arrests. on a total of 12 charges. Arrests included arson 2, attempted robbery 1, arson 5, reckless endangerment, and criminal contempt. And you're saying these are minor charges that he could not be held on?
Yes, I'm telling you that most of those charges are cases that which bail cannot be sought under the new bail law. That is absolutely correct, including robbery charge. Excuse me, you spoke on this, including
Wow.
the lower
70
level arson, including the lower level arson charges, which were setting of fires, criminal trespass. All of them are not cases in which, under the current law, bail could be set. The cases, the arson in the first degree, we had him in front of a judge, and he's now being held. We did have, burglary charges that did not qualify previously. Many of the cases all the ones that you mentioned did not qualify. The ones that did, we asked for bail and the judge released them. I'm not, I'm sorry to say that, this was the status of the case, and but it has nothing to do with anything that you could do or we could do more. We issued those cases. That individual is being charged, but it wasn't until this most recent, more serious case, the highest arson, in which bail could be set. So, if you have an issue with it, we had concerns. I was very supportive of the Bail Reform Act, but there were certain cases that were left out. And the good news is the state legislature has, just recently, part of the new our new budget has modified it so that burglaries are now included in charges in which we could set bail on. Robbery too was not even allowed for us to ask for bail, but we can do that. A1 and A2 narcotics cases, previously we could not ask for bail, and they cover life sentences, sex trafficking, money laundering, promoting sexual performance of a child. There are numerous cases that were not included in the original bail legislation that are now been included and come into effect in July 3.
So, hold on. So this is something that I know we are going to need a lot of time around. I'm really pleased that Mount Vernon, we share him with the Bronx. Senator Jamal Bailey is someone who sits on this committee, and this will give us more, opportunity. Our Westchester delegation within the state is very involved in this conversation. And so I'm looking forward to some robust conversation. I am a supporter of criminal justice reforms, but we also want to make sure that we are able to do our job within local law enforcement. We've had decades of over prosecution and over policing of certain communities, and we want to make sure that this is something that stops. But at the same time, we don't want to make sure, that we overcorrect it. And so, Ms. Rocah, we need you to come back in about 7 minutes. In about 7 minutes. Oh, I don't think she can hear us. So, Mrs. Scarpino, we're going to continue with you because Ms. Rocah is going to start at about 8:45. So, okay, there she is. She stepped out. So here we are.
So I agree with you, Mayor. The legislation, though, has been, the state legislature has made progress in making it even better, our bail reform law. And, it was an historic move. I was supportive of it, continue to be supportive of it. And I'm pleased that the state legislature did some additional tweaking to it that comes into effect in July.
It comes into effect into July. Great.
July 3.
So a question here, implicit bias is really the unconscious or people's stereotypes and attitudes and how it impacts their understanding or their actions and how they deal with their work and how they might prosecute or not go after prosecuting cases. What is your office doing to address implicit bias and how that impacts the work you do, especially understanding that our community is a majority minority community? How are you working or will you work in the future to address implicit bias and ensure that your staff is trained or understands this concept?
So our management when I first came in, had implicit bias training. We have additional implicit bias training that was scheduled to occur that has been interrupted because of COVID. But we've also tried to diversify the office and all of what we do, whether it goes for everything from hiring committees to diversifying our branch chiefs, so that there is input from a wider group of individuals within the office. It's very important for the office to reflect the community. Mount Vernon has a African American branch chief. She is the first branch chief of being an African American branch chief in the history of Westchester County District Attorney's Office. That's Shamika Mathurin, who the commissioner was talking about. She was originally in White Plains branch chief. We have diversified the office. We have a first deputy, never had a first deputy of color, Victor Oles, an African-American man who runs our public integrity area, professional responsibility, and is involved in conviction review. And he's at first deputy. He's one of my 4 first deputies. So by doing that, by diversifying we have Lila Curtin, who is a bureau chief, is involved in our recruitment. Is on our committee there with Victor Rolls, who is the head of our diversity hiring and our hiring committee. So by diversifying the office and having a greater breadth of individuals at the table, you have impact and input in regards to controlling implicit bias. But we have to have additional training for all of our individuals, and we were supposed to have it, and now we are making arrangements to transfer it now to a more virtual approach, and we've set that up. So it's important.
And please understand, implicit bias is not just race and ethnic based. It is class, it is sex, it is religion. It cuts across so many dimensions of diversity. So we could hire people who are diverse, but if the people don't have diverse thoughts, beliefs, and understandings, then we have a multicultural, but not necessarily a thought or philosophical diverse staff.
Absolutely correct. I'll give you just a very quick example on our hiring committee. Many people would always be focusing on the applications of the new assistant district attorneys and looking for the number of internships they did. And that was so important to them. But the fact of the matter is internships are non-paying. And by diversifying that committee, we had other people to weigh in and say, there are segments of the community that cannot give up summer employment because they have to pay for their education. And so there was a classic example of an implicit bias that was there by certain individuals because this is how they viewed the way an individual should come to the office and what their background should be. And by diversifying the office and having a different input from people of different backgrounds, we were able to neutralize that.
Okay, so just, we had one more question really around reentry, but we only have about 2 minutes left. So we want to ask you to really kind of give your closing thoughts. What do you want to say to the audience that is viewing and that will view this over the next few days and weeks? What is it that you want to say to them? Our other question really was focused on reentry, and we hope to have you back to talk about that because reentry is a big part of, not just criminal justice reforms, but of public safety. When we have lots of people who are returning to our community, we have to make sure that we have a way of bringing them back in and working with them to reduce the risk of recidivism and them just coming back to continue the same behaviors and then going back to jail. So that's a whole topic in and of itself. And hopefully before June, we'll be able to have you back so we can talk really and just have a whole conversation around reentry. Is that okay, Commissioner Scott?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, perfect. So, with just a few moments left, can you please give us your closing thoughts?
Well, first of all, thank you again for the opportunity to address you and to try to answer your questions. We in the district attorney's office, our goal is always to try to assist all of our local law enforcement agencies. We have 40 different local law enforcement agencies that we work with. We have a community it's important that we protect all of our communities. And we feel that the job that we do, it's critical that we have communication. It's critical that we work on not just trying to prosecute ourselves out of the problems that we are facing, that we also have to stop people from coming into the system. I always use the example of if you have a boat taking on water, you can't just prosecute by bailing out. You have to stick your finger in the hole in the bottom of the boat and stop people from coming in. The old, idea that you can prosecute yourself out of opioid crisis and drug addiction and other criminal activity is it's very short-sighted. The Rockefeller laws didn't do it. I was involved in the special narcotics part when that's all we tried to do during the crack epidemic. That's all that was done. We put them in jail, and it did not work. And we lost an entire group, entire era of individuals, so an entire generation. And that generation, their children have been impacted on. And it had major impact on the communities like Mount Vernon and others. And so we have to do a better job in stopping people from coming into the system through educating them and diverting them out into community-based supervision and treating their mental illness, their drug addiction, and their economic issues. This is the only way that we are going to have success overall.
Thank you so much. Thank you, DA Scarpino. Thank you for joining us. And we look forward to future conversations to continually educate the community and give them an opportunity to know who you are and to ask questions. We didn't have a lot of time to ask questions from the community, but hopefully the questions that we posed tonight gave the community some answers that they were seeking. Okay? Thank you so much. I
hope maybe you and I can get together for lunch at my favorite place in Mount Vernon, Johnny's Pizzeria, when it reopens.
Well, yeah, when it reopens, when the economy reopens, I look forward to that. Thank you so much and have a good evening. You too. Be well. And I think you just hit at the bottom of your screen. If you hit leave the meeting, it'll take you out.
Yeah, I'm trying to.
Go to the bottom of your screen towards the right and it'll say leave meeting. Put your mouse on the screen and kind of go down to the bottom. Okay, so we have our candidate for DA, Ms. Mimi Rocah is coming, and we're candidate Rocah, Ms. Rocah. We have here tonight with us also our Commissioner Glenn Scott. He is the Commissioner of the Mount Vernon Police Department. He's been Commissioner since January 2nd, I believe, and he is also a 20-year veteran of the Mount Vernon Police Department. He had about 5 years where he was retired in between retirement and coming back to the Mount Vernon PD. So we're glad to have him back. We're glad to have you here on the show. And if you could just open up by telling us a little bit about yourself and why you're running for DA.
Absolutely. But first of all, I do just want to say, Mayor, thank you so much for doing this and having me. And also, I just really want to say how much my heart goes out to Mount Vernon right now. I know that this is a hard time for everyone around the country, but I know Mount Vernon has truly been hit harder than other areas by this crisis. And I'm trying to do my small part separate from this campaign to try and bring some medical supplies through some charitable foundations to the city. But most of all, I just really want everyone to know that I do understand how hard it is, and I'm grateful for people to listen in on this, even during this difficult time. So about me, I live in Westchester with my husband and my 2 kids. I was a federal prosecutor for 16 and a half years, just up until 2017. So it's a job I did until recently. I'm not a politician. I've been really a prosecutor, and I think a good one at that. I worked for 10 years in the city, in New York City, worked my way up through this office, became chief of the organized crime unit, which prosecutes organized crime, which is traditional Italian organized crime, but also Albanian gang cases, Chinese gang cases, human trafficking, a pretty wide range. And I was the chief of that unit for about 4 years. And then in 2012, the U.S. Attorney Preet Bharara, who lives here in Westchester, appointed me during the Obama administration to head up what's called the Westchester office, or the White Plains Division. And it's right in the federal courthouse in White Plains. And so for 5.5 years, I was able to work as a leader here in law enforcement, partnering with all different law enforcement agencies at federal, state, county level, and oversaw investigations and prosecutions dealing with crimes and policies here in Westchester and the surrounding counties as well, Rockland, Orange, Putnam. And, you know, I really think it's that experience that I bring to the table. I think being a prosecutor, when you're going to lead an office of prosecutors, actually really matters. And I think having had that experience as a leader in law enforcement here in Westchester is one of the main reasons that I'm more qualified for this job, frankly.
Okay, well, thank you so much for that introduction. And we're going to kind of just jump into the questions. Our questions are pretty much the same questions. I don't know if you were watching, but one of the greatest concerns that any community has and any mayor or local official has is public safety. And so as the chief law enforcement officer, you're looking to become the chief law enforcement officer for the county of Westchester. I'd like you to share with me your thoughts around public safety when it comes to crime prevention, intervention, and restorative justice.
Absolutely. So I do come at this not only with the background of a prosecutor, but the background of being the daughter of a crime victim. My mother was a victim of a violent rape many years ago, and actually my elderly parents were the victims of a violent home invasion in Chicago. So I know what it feels like to be the family of crime victims. So I understand how important it is to prevent crime. But we have to do it in a way that makes sure that our system is as fair as it can possibly be. And so that's why, first of all, I think it's important for people like me, prosecutors, to say out loud that our system is not entirely fair, and we need to work on fixing that. There are racial injustices and biases in our system. So some of the things that I've proposed doing to help prevent crime, first of all, I've put out a gun safety plan, which people can look at on my website, but basically it's trying to get more guns off the street through innovative policies that I propose, and particularly paying attention to domestic violence victims, because that is an area where, you know, the presence of a gun literally means the difference between life and death, as we're seeing highlighted right now in this stressful time. I've also proposed the creation of a human trafficking unit, because believe it or not, we have a human trafficking problem here in Westchester.
A big one.
Absolutely. And New York State is actually the 5th highest in the nation in terms of human trafficking, which encompasses sex trafficking and a very broad range, and involves interactions over the internet, which has really caused an explosion in this. So I think we need a law enforcement to focus on that. And that's something I've worked a lot on as a federal prosecutor with state and county officials. I've also talked a lot about the need for restorative justice and reentry programs. We have to break the cycle of violence. I mean, that's the bottom line. I have talked before about the case of, I know a case that's very near to your heart, of Shawyn McKenzie. When I was a federal prosecutor, she was murdered by gang violence, and I will never forget finding out about it as a prosecutor and wanting to make sure that the people responsible, all of the people responsible, not just the person holding the gun, was charged with a crime. And but that's not enough, because every one of those people who has been charged with a crime now for her death had actually been arrested before. And I think that we in law enforcement, we as a society, failed not just Shawyn, but those people who are now charged and facing decades in prison, because we could have done something on the first arrest, on the second arrest, some kind of intervention where we offered them an alternative. And so I have talked a lot about pre-arraignment diversion programs. I have talked with Shawyn McKenzie's mother, who runs the Shawyn McKenzie Foundation, which is about helping to prevent the cycle of violence. And that is something that is a very big focus of mine, something in particular in Mount Vernon I really want to focus on. And I was actually surprised to hear the current DA talk about pre-arraignment diversion programs tonight, because I've never heard him talk about that before, but it is something I've been talking about since day one.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate, your thoughts. So prevention, like I said, prevention, intervention, and restorative justice are all equally important because there is a continuum of crime, and we have to make sure that we are addressing it from every angle and in every way, and continuing to expand partnerships around public safety. So I'm going to kick the next question over to our Commissioner Scott, who is ready with a question for you.
First of
You're
all,
live.
say hello.
Hi, Commissioner.
How are you?
I'm doing all right, thanks.
All right. It was great seeing you. I had that meet with you down in your office a couple of weeks ago, and it was really great. I appreciate that. What I would like to know is that if you take over the role as DA, what can the Mount Vernon Police Department do to solidify a relationship with you and improve our cases and try to get more productive cases and stuff under your supervision?
So you're not going to have to do much, in the sense that, as I said, I was a prosecutor for 16 and a half years. I've worked with every different law enforcement agency in New York City, in Westchester. And I think if you asked 99.9% of law enforcement that I worked with what I was like as a prosecutor, they would say she was fair, she communicated with us, and she treated us like a partner. And that's the most important thing, I think, that we need to have this office in terms of change of its viewpoint of how it works with law enforcement. When I was a prosecutor, when it came time to decide who was going to be charged in a case, the prosecutors, we didn't decide it and then tell law enforcement, here's who we're charging. And I know you think there's 8 other people that should be charged, but sorry, that's not happening. We sat down ahead of time together, prosecutors and police, and we went through each potential person to be charged and talked about why they could or couldn't. Doesn't mean we always agreed on it, but we talked through the process so that even when there were differences, at the end of the process, everybody understood where the other one was coming from. I believe strongly in collaborative law enforcement, which means, first of all, different types of law enforcement working together, but it also means prosecutors working with the police, with the agents, in order to build cases together. So you come to us often, or a civilian comes to us and gives us some kind of information, and we don't just say, well, come back to us when you have enough evidence. We say, okay, let's work on getting this evidence together. We'll tell you what we need, and you tell us if you can get it, and then we'll talk through what you've got. So I think that partnership is the absolute best way for law enforcement to proceed effectively, fairly, efficiently. And that's how I've always conducted myself as a prosecutor.
You know what? That's an excellent explanation. And I also would like to ask you, I ran on a platform that I was going to get rid of the bad actors and characters in the PD. And I was willing to go against what everybody considers the blue wall or blue shield. All right. And I wanted to rid my department of corruption. And it seems like, and the DA explained why there were delays and everything in the investigations. But what would you do to push these investigations along so that I would be able to rid my department of the bad actors?
So I commend you for having run on that platform, because it frankly takes political courage to run on that kind of platform. And I think it sends a message that you are in this position, given that was your priority. That sends a message of what the community wants and what this mayor wants in her city. And look, again, as a federal prosecutor, having worked here in Westchester, I know the problems you're talking about, and I was frustrated by them as a prosecutor. It was harder to work with the Mount Vernon Police Department as a partner because of those issues. So The bad apples that you talk about, it's first of all, it is, you know, just should be, it's the wrong thing, right? We don't want in any form of government, at any level of government, in any office of government, people who are abusing their public's trust. That is just, you know, it's what we're seeing at the federal level and Donald Trump to an extreme, and we shouldn't tolerate it in our own community in any way. But it also makes us less safe because it is harder for other people in law enforcement. It is harder to get at the real bad actors, the criminals on the street. It is simply harder for law enforcement to do its job in very real ways when we have corruption or misconduct in any form in any public officials, but especially in the police department. I was involved in prosecuting agents when I was a federal prosecutor. I was involved in prosecuting correction officers when they abused their power. And that's really what it is. It's an abuse of power. And so, you know, the current DA said that he takes this very seriously, but yet we really haven't seen public corruption cases coming out of that office. You know, when there was a high profile public corruption prosecution in Mount Vernon of the Corporation Counsel, it was the New York Attorney General that did that, not the District Attorney's Office. And if I were the DA, I would be quite embarrassed by that, frankly, because I think it's the DA's job to police their own community, or at least to partner with other law enforcement for doing that. So it's something I would be very aggressive on. The DA has actually reduced the public integrity unit in his office by one prosecutor. So I'm not sure how he can say he's prioritizing it, but it is one of the main parts of my platform is prosecuting public corruption, really rooting it out, making sure you have an office that is open to the public and the community so that people feel that they have a safe place to come and bring these complaints. That's the other piece of it. Mm-hmm. And I don't think we have that right now.
So, Ms. Rocah, I can tell you that as I ran, definitely on my platform was rooting out corruption, getting rid of bad actors. That is one of the primary reasons I brought Commissioner Scott, because I knew he felt the same. Additionally, we wanted to make sure that we really established a good civilian complaint review board. For a while, for many years, Mount Vernonites have been discouraged from making complaints and bringing forth complaints to the PD. And I can tell you, since Commissioner Scott came in, not only has he encouraged people, even on social media, please bring the complaint. And when they brought the complaint, he has sat down personally with some of the people, because this has not been a practice and it's not been a priority. I'm not looking to hurt good police. I am Absolutely. Looking to separate, and that's something I need to be clear about. I've had law enforcement in my family. I've worked closely with local law enforcement, county law enforcement, New York State, as well as federal law enforcement on everything from prevention to intervention to restorative justice. I've worked for the court system. So I've worked in and around public safety for over 20, 25 years. But I know the importance of having a police department, especially in a small community like Mount Vernon with big city issues, that are trustworthy, that are reliable, and that the community feels that they can come and speak to, and that when they come and speak to them in confidence, that this will not be information that is shared in any way that is reckless. So running a police department in a smaller community sometimes is even more difficult than a larger community because of the incestuous nature of relationships in those community and how everyone knows everyone. And when people know that you're not the most reliable person in law enforcement, that gets around very quickly and it diminishes public trust. So yeah, well, I mean, you answered the question that I had that was going to be talking about, you know, bad actors in a police department. So I'm going to jump to another question that I have. You know, implicit bias is something that we've talked about for the last, you know, probably 5 years and even more so in the past 2 years. And it's really a person's, how a person's unconscious biases and stereotypes and personal dislikes impact the way that they work. And when it comes to a DA's office, a prosecutor's office, implicit bias definitely can, will, and does impact how you prosecute cases and how you choose not to prosecute cases. What has been your experience around this, and what will you do if elected to address implicit bias and ensure that this is minimized and has a minimal impact on how cases are prosecuted or not prosecuted in Westchester?
Yeah, thank you for that question, because it's really such an important topic, and it's something, again, that prosecutors need to say out loud, right? Not just community activists or other elected officials, but the prosecutors need to acknowledge that implicit bias taints our system, and we know that happens. And I've been saying that since day one of this campaign, and I've been saying that I would put in place a regular program with both implicit and explicit bias training. The current DA, I think, said he's been working on it, but he's been there for 3 years. And as far as I know, there is not been any regular training of prosecutors on implicit or explicit bias. And that's just, in today's world, that's just inexcusable. It doesn't have to be, the training doesn't have to be this sort of thing where, we put it on the computer and people, I have to do my training. We can make it really meaningful, not just do it in name only. Let's make it substantive and meaningful and really teach people. And it's not just about race, but it is largely about race, but it's also about gender. A lot of sex crimes do not get prosecuted because prosecutors and police officers need better training in terms of our implicit biases of what we think, evidence is supposed to look like and how a crime victim is supposed to sound. And those really, again, it all goes back to actually making us less safe when the wrong people are prosecuted or not the right cases are aggressively pursued. So I think saying it out loud, putting in place regular, meaningful training, and having transparency. And this is something, again, if people want to go to my website, I've put forth a pretty revolutionary transparency plan for the DA's office. I think it's really pretty bold, even in terms of other DAs around the country. And what it means is putting out there the data, the statistics about who gets arrested, who gets charged, what their sentences are, what the disparities are. Because the way to really address these issues is to know what we're looking at. You can't fix the problem if you can't really see it and identify it. And again, this is also a big part of my reforming the sex crimes unit also, because there are a lot of crimes that just go unprosecuted and we don't even know those statistics right now. And we need to focus on that. So I would say that those are some of the ways I would address it. I'm very aware of this problem. Like most police officers, I think most prosecutors are there to do good. I think they want to serve their community, but I think it's easy for prosecutors to get in this tunnel vision. That is what causes a lot of the wrongful prosecutions and problems. It is tunnel vision where you think, I know who did this, and you ignore the red flags. And this is something I've talked a lot about. It's why I've proposed a real and meaningful conviction integrity unit for this office, which it has not had. The DA now says he has one, but he frankly did not talk about a conviction integrity unit, which means preventing innocent people from going to jail, until I started proposing it on my campaign. And it's also about preventing wrongful convictions in the first place. So this is something that again, I prioritize, and the transparency is key. And I have never heard this district attorney talk about the need for transparency. In fact, the opposite.
Thank you so much. I'm going to bring this over to Commissioner Scott now, who I know has another question. And we're moving through the questions, so hopefully we'll have an opportunity also to get to some of the viewers' questions.
Great.
Mimi.
Yes.
The DA stated that he didn't have enough to prosecute. There was basically nothing he could do with our Rittenhour situation. He blamed it on the judges. He stated we didn't have enough evidence. He stated that none of these things were in his control, even upon the preponderance of evidence and criminality that this guy did, that he could bring in front of a judge to get him to do anything. So our community was besieged by a one-man crime spree and Mr. Lamont Ridenour. The individual was arrested on 32 occasions since February. And I don't believe that any other community would have tolerated this amount of criminality without him being prosecuted and put away. So when the mayor talks about implicit bias and things like that, I am in whole agreement. And I'm going to put you on the spot because I'm going to read out what the charges we had against him. And I'm going to read out why I think the DA's office failed to prosecute, at least in the totality of the charges. Okay? Since January 1st of 2020, Ridenour was arrested on a plethora of charges, including varying degrees of arson, robbery, attempted robbery, grand and petty larceny, reckless endangerment, criminal trespass, and criminal contempt. In total, he's been arrested 32 times on 49 criminal charges. These are what the DA's office said they could not pull the trigger on. Okay? February, he had 4 arrests, and 1 was a warrant arrest. Okay, and others on criminal trespass. And one of those instances, he was also charged with criminal possession of a controlled substance 7. March is the arson charges began. Ridenour was arrested a total of 22 times. Okay, on charges of arson that varied, including 14 criminal trespass or trespassing charges, 5 arson charges, 2 arson 5, 2 arson 3, 1 arson 4, 2 criminal contempts, 1 robbery 3, and various other misdemeanor and violation charges. And this month, we also had 4 occasions where there were 2 arrests on a single day. In April, he had a total of 6 arrests on a total of 12 charges. Arrests include arson 2, attempted robbery 1, arson 5, reckless endangerment, and criminal contempt. Are you saying that if you, as a prosecutor, you couldn't build a case on these and put this forward without us having to build the last case we had where we actually had to get mental health to hold this person instead of the DA's office giving him a DAT ticket and releasing him back into society again? Are you saying your office would allow this? This is what I want to know.
Look, I have been stunned by this case. I am wary as a prosecutor of second guessing prosecutorial decisions of other prosecutors because sometimes we don't know all of the information that a prosecutor has. But here, it's just so overwhelming and it is so obvious that this was terrorizing the community that something had to be done. And for this district attorney to repeatedly say, as he did again tonight, as he did in his statement that he put out, well, not my fault, basically. He's blaming everybody else, but his not taking responsibility. And leaders take responsibility, right? Leaders find a way to lead. And this is not about the individual prosecutors or what they did or didn't do on the case. This is about the district attorney and what he did or didn't do in terms of finding a solution. I mean, the fact of the matter is here, you found the solution. The solution was to have him brought to a hospital and detained based on the threat of him being a danger to himself or others because of his potential mental illness, which is pretty obvious was a factor here. That should have happened before. If they could not have gotten him detained based on the criminal charges, then he should have been detained based on the solution that you ultimately found. And I don't know why the DA's office why the district attorney himself did not say, this is where this law comes into place. He should be detained based on the mental health issues, if nothing else. Also, I would say here, because of the extreme nature of this case, if they were truly having the problems they were having, and this is where collaborative law enforcement comes into play, in getting him detained, if they weren't able to convince a judge, and all of the other excuses that the DA has given, I would have turned to the federal partners and said, what can you do? Because federal charges could come into play here, absolutely. I mean, as you called it, a one-man crime spree can be eligible for federal charges that take a sort of conglomeration of different state charges, and you make one federal charge, and that person would be detained. I have little doubt in my mind. And so, instead of throwing up his hands and saying, I couldn't do anything, you look for creative solutions. And this is a hallmark of what I want to bring to this DA's office, is finding innovative and creative solutions, both in the public safety area and in the crime prevention area. And I think this shows that this district attorney is not capable of doing that.
Thank you.
Wow. Okay, so that's a lot, and as you said, it's about collaborative law enforcement and a collaborative approach. I've had the opportunity over the past, I guess, about 25 years to work in reentry, as well as start the drug court in our region, which was an alternative to incarceration, definitely a collaborative approach. And for the past 10 years, we initiated the SNUG program, which was also Cure Violence here in the state of New York, and have worked with the gun-involved violence elimination program, which previously was Impact. So a lot of community policing programs, a lot of partnerships with the Division of Criminal Justice Services, the Department of Justice, the Office of Juvenile Justice Delinquency Programs. So there's just so many creative ways and collaborative ways that we can approach public safety. So I'm going to kind of go back to my original question. We have about 15 minutes left. I'm going to go back to the original question. And I said public safety through prevention, intervention, and restorative justice. You spoke about some of the preventative programs and some of the interventions. Can you also now talk about restorative justice? Can you talk to us about reentry programs and how we can help restore people back to wholeness who have been involved who have been justice involved?
So I think the simplest way I can put it is we need to, now that we are working on a model of de-incarceration, incarcerating less people, which in the long run is, actually helping our community be more safe. And we need to work on getting some of the services that we provide in prisons out of the prisons and into the community for people as they're coming back into the community, right? So we need to make sure that we have drug treatment, job training, prevention in terms of counseling, things that, which SNUG is very good at, sort of intervening. And we need to take the services out of the prisons and put them in the community. That is the best that we can do, I think, in terms of making sure that people get reintegrated into the community, because they do get some services in prison, but that's not a reason to stay in prison. We need to make sure those services are provided outside of prison. Now, that isn't the DA alone, but you need a DA who's really going to recognize the value in that and advocate for that. I also have signed on as a supporter of what's called the Less is More Act, which is about not over-incarcerating people for technical parole violations, which is something that we have really historically done here in New York State, here in Westchester. Again, that cuts against people coming back into society and becoming productive members of society. If every time there is now obviously if someone is a threat to the community's safety, that's a different story. But when it's a technical violation, once we take them and put them back into an incarceration situation, you've disrupted whatever progress has been made in terms of reestablishing relationships and jobs. And then the slightly more, I think, even innovative, maybe a little bit controversial part of restorative justice is the idea of having crime victims talking with the perpetrators of crimes. And that's something I'm in favor of doing as long as the crime victims want to do it. It should 100% be up to them. It should never be imposed on them. But if it is something that they opt into doing, that both parties agree to, that can actually really lead to reduced recidivism as well.
So I want to ask a question really quickly because DA Scarpino spoke about bail reform and there being kind of loopholes or there are things that you could not call for bail on. Just, in looking at bail reform and some of the adjustments and amendments that are going to be made as of July, do you have any thoughts around what the law has been and where it's going now?
Well, look, I think some of the holes that clearly were there that are being fixed, that's a good thing. I think it's good that they did not go the option of sort of giving into the fear mongering and just turning back, all of the reforms. I mean, we needed reform in New York State. The idea that people were being incarcerated, not because of their real risk to public safety or their real risk of flight, but because they couldn't pay the money that was set by the judge for bail. It's both unfair, but it also makes no sense from a law enforcement perspective. I, as a federal prosecutor, worked often with the DA's office and would be surprised, to put it mildly, at who was and who wasn't detained. It didn't make sense. I think we're getting there. I think it's a work in progress. The robbery 2 example, I think is a good one because it really didn't make sense. The idea that someone would come into your home to commit a crime, but because they didn't commit a certain act of violence, they were not bail eligible, that just makes no sense. I mean, obviously, if someone is coming into someone's home, they need that crime needs to be taken seriously, and that should be bail eligible. That has been corrected. My understanding is the whole reason for that exception was because they didn't want people who were going into, say, vestibules in apartment buildings in New York City and taking packages for that crime to be treated in that way. So now the law is written in a way that it separates those two because they're very different kinds of crimes. Coming into someone's home is a much more serious crime than going into a lobby vestibule of an apartment building. It's very different in nature. So I think that we're getting there. I come from a system where bail was not, frankly, the only means of ensuring someone's safety return to court. Detention was an option. That is something that, judicial discretion detention based on, it was the exception to the rule. It was very rarely used, but when it was used, it obviously is more effective. I don't think that bail set in and of itself really does prevent flight or ensure the safety of the community, but it's the tool that we're using now. And I think we have to plug those loopholes, which they're doing.
Okay, so before I turn it back over to Commissioner Scott, we had one question that I wanted to get to because it was specific. One of the viewers asked, how would you deal with a police commissioner publicly criticizing your work or what they felt was not enough effort of your office? Commissioner Scott recently did say in a Black Westchester news article that he didn't feel the DA did enough. And so I guess this is what the question is referring to.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I have to say, I really hope it wouldn't come to that because I just govern I would lead in a very different way. I mean, my relationship with the police, I'm not saying we would agree on everything, but it shouldn't get to that point where the police commissioner feels like the only way to get the DA to act is to speak publicly like that. I'm not faulting the police commissioner for doing that. I'm saying I hope that I, as the DA, would be more effective in my partnership and in my communication, that even if we disagree, he feels like I'm actually listening and I'm actually hearing what they're saying, not just paying lip service to it and not just paying attention when it's time for an election, but actually having a relationship of communication and understanding. And that's how I've worked as a prosecutor, as a leader in law enforcement for 16 years. Didn't agree on everything, but boy, we never had a time where someone in law enforcement felt like they had to go around me to get me to listen, to really listen, or where someone felt like they couldn't have a true conversation with me. So that's the I think the first and foremost thing I can say is that it's about how I lead, that and I listen, that you feel like you don't have to go to that extreme. If it happens, it happens. And I wanted to, I take responsibility for my mistakes. I'm not perfect. And I admit them when I do them. But I think this is really an issue of communication. I'll give one example. I mean, in this case, the district attorney and the police unions ended up in court, litigating the issue of whether or not the district attorney should disclose certain material about the police. I was really stunned to see that actually get into court, to have a judge decide between the DA's office and the police. To me, that is something that even if everybody couldn't agree on everything, you should be able to work out some compromise together. I would not, as DA, have let it get to that point.
So Commissioner Scott, we are closing out, and you have the last question, and then we are going to have Ms. Rocah just say your closing remarks. And so Ms. Rocah, I want to say thank you so much for coming on. Commissioner Scott, I want to say thank you so much for coming on. I know you've been kind of battling flu and stuff like that recently. So thank you for taking out this time. It's late, it's Sunday. So thank you so much. So Commissioner Scott, back into your hands.
Mayor, you're welcome. I thank you for inviting me onto this platform. I feel that a lot of things have been clarified for the people of Mount Vernon. I want to say that a lot of police agencies are actually angry with the DA because of the way he treated certain officers. There was an article that was put out there where officers actually had personal issues that they were involved in. I had one officer of mine, he's a sergeant, and somebody back in the day stepped up to him and his daughter and threatened him and his daughter, and he took physical action, and the officer actually got arrested. There were several people out there where the officers have DWIs, and I want to say this is something that police don't have mental health care. We don't. We have nobody to go to. Okay, so sometimes we drink too much and we do whatever, and we self-medicate and things like that, and you occasionally get caught up in a DWI, and it was off duty and had nothing to do with these officers being on duty. Okay, and all of these officers in this article were actually, they did commit things that were unsanctionable and not in the
line of duty.
Right, in the alignment of duty or whatever, but these were things that were off duty. And instead, and I talked to DA Scarpino about this, and I told him, I said, if you loop these officers into a group of officers that have no credibility and put them in this article, you're ruining their careers. I said, these officers have done nothing wrong, have never lied or anything where they have no credibility. And he lumped all of these officers who had these off-duty arrests into people with officers that had no credibility. And I thought that was wrong. And I hope that under your guidance, if you are elected DA, that you will never do anything like that. Because I thought that was comprehensible. So that's all I want to say as a last statement, and get your feedback on that article that came out that portrayed good officers that had mistakes in their lives as being uncredible anymore because of these mistakes that had absolutely nothing to do with their law enforcement work.
Right. So, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. Here's the problem. So I and many other, many people in the community, many reform groups, advocacy groups were calling for this DA to put out an adverse credibility list. And that's something that DAs all over the New York area have done. He didn't do it quickly, took a long time. Really, I think only happened, because of this campaign, frankly. And then when it did come out, it was puzzling. Why? It was over-inclusive. It included officers and information about them that has nothing to do with their credibility. As you say, a DUI in and of itself is not about an officer's credibility. As a prosecutor, I had many cases where we went to a judge before a trial. An officer was going to testify, and we went to the judge and we said, "Judge, we think that the defense is going to try to bring up the fact that this officer had a DWI or something. And we think that should be precluded, and we're asking you ahead of time because it doesn't have anything to do with the officer's credibility." And most often the judges would grant that. That is something that is pretty widely recognized in legal circles. So I don't know why all of those were included on the list. You know, he first delayed putting out the list, which I think might have had something to do with the fact that one of his executives actually did have an adverse credibility finding and had to be included on the list. And then when the list did come out, it had all sorts of information on there that really did not go to the purpose of the list. It was over-inclusive. And I do think that's a disservice to law enforcement. And it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't serve the public to put that information out there in that way. Now, if someone lied about their conviction or there was some credibility issue, that's a different story. But just having an old DWI conviction is not a reason for them to be included on what's called an adverse credibility list.
Thank you for clarifying that. And I hope the community and the public realizes that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So Ms. Rocah, as we are winding down now, we just want to give you kind of 2 minutes to close out. And what are your closing thoughts and what would you like the community to know in closing?
Thank you. So I want to bring to this DA's office a different approach. And that's an approach, first of all, of being innovative, being proactive, not waiting for the problems to get so big and just come to me, but to look out ahead and see what's on the horizon and work together with law enforcement, with the community to try and prevent some of these problems from getting so big that they become crises. This is how I've always worked. I've learned from wonderful mentors as prosecutor that the goal of a prosecutor is not just to do prosecutions. That is obviously one part of the job, and that is part of keeping the community safe. But it is much broader than that. It's about doing justice. And doing justice means trying to do the right thing in the circumstance. And that can mean pursuing a case aggressively, or it can mean backing off of a case and admitting that you got something wrong. And so part of what I want to bring to this office is a new culture and teaching the prosecutors who are there, giving them the opportunity to learn about being a progressive prosecutor in the real meaning of the word, not just a label for political purposes, but being a prosecutor who really thinks about fairness and justice, both for victims and for people who might be caught into the system, charged in the system, and hopefully preventing some of that. One of the other big aspects that I really hope to bring to this office is one of integrity and ethics reform. I think that politics has no place in the DA's office. It's an elected position, but it should not be a political office. And we should not be running our justice system. The chief law enforcement officer should not be thinking about their next election, their next campaign. We have to, criminal justice and politics do not go well together. So one of my main goals also is to take the politics out of the office. It's part of why I've already started doing that by not taking campaign donations from elected officials, not taking campaign donations from police unions, and not taking campaign donations from criminal defense attorneys who will have cases in front of my office. I'm trying to eliminate the conflicts of interest. We as Democrats get so upset at how the Republicans don't seem to put in our federal government, don't seem to put ethics as a priority, right? It's all just how do they keep power? Well, we here on the local level, and starting especially in our DA's office, should be a model of integrity. And that's the best way to serve the community, I think, and to help keep the community safe, but also make sure that it's a fair justice system.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So Mount Vernon, here you have it. We have our two candidates for district attorney. They spoke tonight. They answered the same questions. We wanted to make sure that we presented the same questions so that it could be apples to apples. And you know, there's much more, of course, to talk about. And so as I spoke to DA Scarpino, Ms. Rocah, you know, definitely we would like to have you back before the June election so that we can continue this conversation. But, you know, Mount Vernon is definitely looking for whoever's in that office to be a partner with our police department to ensure that they are aggressive in finding solutions, whether that is prosecution or whether it's alternatives to incarceration or whether it's restorative justice. We want to make sure that there is an aggressive air, land, and sea approach. We're looking for a partner in helping us get rid of bad actors in our police department and finding public safety solutions for our community. So thank you so much. Thank you again, Commissioner Scott, for coming on. Thank you, watching and viewing audience, for joining us tonight. And please share the video. Tell your friends to come back and watch it. I think there was a lot of good information here tonight from both DA Scarpino and Ms. Rocah, and hopefully it helps to inform you as you move forward and you have more questions. Thank you very much and have a great evening. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, and thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Be well.
Take care.